The Bilderbergers, originally sponsored by Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands, who's also on the charts in Holy Blood, Holy Grail. He's also descended from Jesus Christ and Mary Magdalene, if you believe this theory. Prince Bernhard founded the Bilderbergers. Otto von Habsburg has been the chief financier behind it. Otto von Habsburg's grandfather gave several million francs to the priest who built that weird church of Mary Magdalene in Rennes-le-Château with the sign over the door saying this place is terrible, and the brick in the cellar that will let you down to the center of hollow earth, if you believe the other story. At this point, I got to tell you, one of the grand masters of the Priory of Science in the 1960s was Jean Cocteau, who was also one of the founders of the Surrealist movement, the biggest opium head in France, experimented with peyote also. There's a movie Cocteau made with BBC called Portrait of a Poet, and Cocteau insisted on being in on the editing. It was not just about him, he wanted it to have his own style. There's a scene in there, Cocteau coming out of his house, and a policeman stops him, asks him a couple of questions, and then lets him walk on. And on the soundtrack, you hear Cocteau's voice saying, "The poet must always be a suspicious character. The authorities must always worry what he is hatching." That's why they have public schools, remember? Make sure nobody's hatching anything. We're all just repeating like parrots. My beautiful wife, Orlin, has read some of this literature, not as much as I have, but I keep waving these books at her and say, "Jesus Christ, look at this, isn't this fantastic? What do you think about this?" And she looked to Holy Blood, Holy Grail and said, "Oh, it's obvious. I can see it. 1932, a cellar in Paris. Cocteau, Dali, Andre Breton, a whole bunch. They're all sitting around smoking opium. And one of them says, "You know, surrealism has pretty much had it. People are getting bored. We can't revive Dada. What are we going to do?" And Cocteau takes a long toke. "Let's overthrow the Catholic Church." Well, that's Orlin's theory. But the Priory of Science can be proven to be older than Cocteau. It goes back at least to the 1890s and probably a couple of centuries before that. Maybe back to the 13th century even, like they claim. There's recently been a book by a Jungian psychologist named Ian Begg called The Cult of the Black Virgin. At least one of these books is actually here to show you I'm not making all this up as I go along. Oh, here's Holy Blood, Holy Grail. So, Ian Begg made a study of the 400 and something more than 400 statues in European churches of the Virgin Mary, in which the Virgin Mary appears to be black or Negro. Now, if these statues all appeared in the last 40 or 60 years, you might make a good case of attributing them to the Rastafarians. The Rastafarians believed that Jesus and his whole family were black. They also believe all the heroes of the Old Testament were black. They got some good biblical references to back this. If you believe that black in the King James Version means black racially, depends on, there's room for interpretation. But the Rastafarians did not do this. These statues have been there for 700 years. Most of them can be definitely dated to the 13th century. So who did it? Well, according to Ian Begg, the Priory of Sion did it. For some reason in the 13th century, they went all over Europe planting statues to indicate that the house of David was black, or at least part of it was black by the time it got to Jesus anyway. Why did they do this? Well, maybe it was true. If you take a look at the map, the Near East and Africa are pretty close. There must have been a lot of genetic drift back and forth. Read some of the Rastafarian literature. They'll convince you. They have a lot of good. Ian Begg doesn't go into that. He says black is a symbol of the supreme mystical state. Only the ignorant Buddhists think white light represents the supreme mystical state. The Sufis know that above the white light there's the trance of total blackness, which is is the highest trance of all and reveals the true nature of everything, which Aleister Crowley described as nothing. The true nature of everything is nothing. That is the negative void. You think of a positive void as endless whiteness. You got to think of it as endless blackness to get the negative void, the Kabbalistic zero, and that's the true essence of everything, according to the Sufi tradition and according to Aleister Crowley. The Priory of Sion put these statues all over Europe. As a matter of fact, there's one in Dublin. Our Lady of Dublin is black. I've actually seen her. And like all the other black virgins around Europe, she was lost and refound. Almost every one of these black statues, there's a legend about how she got lost and then miraculously was recovered. Our Lady of Dublin was found in a blacksmith's yard after being lost for 200 years. Genesis. This fellow studies the geometry of that church in Rennes-le-Château in relation to the geometry of the surrounding area. You see, he managed to make pentagons, he managed to make spirals, all sorts of interesting patterns. Yeah, this is the one he calls the vagina of Nuit. Nuit was the Egyptian star goddess. This illustrates the first law of lay hunters, which is that any group of churches and prehistoric megaliths can be connected into an interesting geometrical pattern if you use a small enough map and a thick enough pencil. He uses a small enough map and a thick enough pencil to get the most interesting diagrams I've ever seen in any of these lay hunting books. And he proves, once he's got his diagrams of the relation of the church to the prehistoric megaliths and various stars, he proves that France was settled by people from Atlantis. When Atlantis sank, some of the survivors got to France, and they kept alive the tradition of how the human race was created. The human race was created by an extraterrestrial named Satan. Satan was not an angel at all, he was an extraterrestrial. And we've all got his genetic strain. So we are all children of Satan. And once we recognize that, we will be liberated and ready for the next revelation from outer space. Now you got to admit, some people are stupid, some people are batshit crazy, and some are just full of shit. You got to admit this is much better bullshit than you get from Romford. Ramtha has been dead 40,000 years and hasn't had an original thought in all that time. You can't get anything from Ramtha you can't get from Hallmark greeting cards. Well, or the editorials in Reader's Digest. This stuff is original and provocative. This stuff might actually come from extraterrestrials. At least it shows a rather transhuman sense of humor and a definite attempt to adjust our minds in such a way that we are no longer sure that we fully understand the difference between poetry and reality, which is another reason for suspecting Cocteau was the main architect. But this does enlarge the mind, liberate the energies, and create an acute case of paranoia when you trace all the people on that Merovingian chart, like Otto von Habsburg is the president of the Society for the United States of Europe. They've been working for decades to create a united Europe, which is about to appear. Just when they're about to do it, the whole Eastern Bloc breaks loose from Russia. Why did Gorbachev let them break loose? Who's dealing with who behind the scenes? What has this got to do with the gnomes of Zurich, who put up the financing before any major political change can occur? What has this got to do with the Pay-Do group in Italy? Pay-Do was using the Vatican Bank to launder most of the cocaine money from South America and most of the heroin money from the Near East. The heroin money came by way of the Grey Wolves, one of whom, Mehmet Ali Agca, ran the money through the Banco Ambrosiano in Milan, which was owned by the Vatican Bank. He tried to shoot the Pope, remember, in St. Peter's Square? It's funny how many people try to kill this Pope. It's like a mafia family, isn't it?